everyone, Kristina here. Welcome to another Color Wednesday video. Today I'm going to be using this stamp set from Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous called Bird Crazy, and I'm going to be trying out a new watercolor pencil product for me. This is from Prima. These watercolor pencils just came out recently, and I have the basic set, the basic color set that I'm going to play with today. And I'm just going to walk you through kind of what I did to get to know the pencils and my thoughts on my personal favorite way to use them. So the stamps are going to be stamped in StazOn jet black ink onto some Strathmore cold press watercolor paper. I'm using this watercolor paper because it's a really good one for watercolor techniques that are kind of more loose and a little bit more of an artistic look. And I'm also using the ink because it's waterproof. So I'm starting out on this first bird doing kind of the technique where you color on a couple different colors that you want to blend together first. And then I'm using a water brush. This is a Pentel Deluxe water brush. And a lot of people like to use water brushes because the water is in the barrel of the brush and you have a constant flow of water, and you also don't have to have a secondary water source. You don't have to have a cup of water or a bucket of water. You can just have the pen that is filled with water or the brush that's filled with water. So a lot of people like to use a water brush like this with their watercolor pencils or even Inktense pencils or distress markers because of convenience. And I used to use them a lot as well. And until I realized, and I'm rediscovering this as I'm experimenting here, that you don't have quite as much control over the flow of water. When you use a secondary water source and just pick up the water with the watercolor brush, or even picking it up with an empty water brush where you don't have any water in the barrel, you just use it as a regular brush, you have more control over the water because you only have the water that's actually in the bristles of the brush. No water comes out after all that water has been expelled. So it's a little bit easier to control the flow of water. Now, using a water brush like this, while convenient and does give a pretty good look, I think I probably prefer using a regular watercolor brush. And you'll see some of the results and some of the little bit of testing that I did in this video to kind of come to that conclusion once more. So after the first bird, I decided to watercolor a couple other birds, and I used a different method this time. On the packaging of the watercolor pencils, it mentions dipping the pencil in water and then going on to your project. So I thought I would try a little bit of that. The only thing that I was bothered by or that I didn't like with this method is that you only get, 2 or 3 strokes of the pencil before it's all dry again. And then it's hard to figure out, like, how is that any different than just drying on your paper when it's dry? I think the real big difference with that is that when you're adding a really strong color like this orange right here, it goes on really strong at first, but it's also wet. So it doesn't leave indentations on the watercolor paper, and it's almost like the color sits on top a little bit more than when you just color on there with it dry. So you'll notice as I add my watercolor brush here, or my water brush here, that quite a bit of color gets transferred and moved around, and you don't really see any of the strokes of me drawing onto the paper. It gets the watercolor moving a little bit more. So there is that method. So I finished up that bird using a little more reds with that, and I thought I'd try another method. I just drew the colored pencil onto a laminated piece of paper so the surface is slick. You can do that and pick up the color from there, but I didn't like the concentration of color. It was very, very pale and didn't add much color. So I tested out another bird using that same method, and then I thought to myself, what happens if I really embrace those pencil line strokes that kind of appear when you color straight onto it? If I embrace that idea, add even more color, kind of put more pressure onto the watercolor paper as I color, and what happens with that? So that's what I'm trying on this bird. I colored on quite a bit of that yellow color, and I'm seeing how it works as I move it up to the top of the bird's head. And the thing that I noticed with this is that you rub your brush over the surface where you've colored and it pulls a little bit of color out, and you can go back again and rub your brush over the top again because there's still more pigment in the paper and you can still pull that out. So Of all the methods using the water brush, I think I like this method the most, but you do have to take note that some of the stronger colors really do spread quite a bit. So the yellow is quite pale. It didn't spread a whole lot. The orange spread a little bit more. And the way to kind of contain that color from spreading is to scribble onto some scratch paper and get rid of the color on your brush, and then come back with a clean brush tip and then kind of extend that color out. So here's that red color, and I barely put any on at all, and it is super, super strong. So this is just another example of how strong these colors are, especially if you kind of pack on the color onto the paper. So I'm kind of going over and cleaning off my brush tip, and then I decided, I'll just go ahead and extend that all the way up. So here's where I switched methods, and I decided to do the same concentrated coloring method where I'm adding quite a bit of color, but I switched to a watercolor brush. I don't even know if this is actually technically a watercolor brush. It's just a paintbrush. It's just a crafting paintbrush. So you could use whatever brush you have on hand. The one thing I did notice that I do need to mention here is that the tip of this watercolor brush is smaller than the tip of the water brush that I was using previously. So the amount of water that is in the tip of the brush would automatically be less just because the brush is smaller. But I also liked using a smaller brush because it contained the amount of water I was using. So for the method on this one, I put a little bit of color along the edges, did one color at a time, and dried them in between. And I really liked the look of this. It gave me a more concentrated, kind of darker shadow in the darker areas where I wanted it, and then it faded off to a lighter color. I think this also gives more of a painterly look. You can see a little more of the brush strokes. So I think I prefer this method, if only because I feel like I can control the color more. And I also wanted to make note that when you're using a new coloring medium like this, you really just want to experiment and play and get to know what you're using. So that's a little bit of what I'm doing today too. So I'm going to test this with the water brush. I just did 10 strokes of the red, and I'm going to see how far the color extends with that water brush. I'm going to go back to the color and pull more of that out and extend it as far as I can before I feel like the paper is kind of saturated and there's no more color that's going to extend. So now I'm going to take a regular brush with some water on the tip and see how far I can extend it on this one. So as I extend this out, it looks like it's going to fall short quite a bit. But then when I go back and grab more pigment up at the concentrated area, it does pull out that color a little bit more. So you can see that you have a little more of a gradient with the water brush, but the color stops fading a little bit more quickly when you use the watercolor brush. So I'm going to try that with just a thinner stroke here, using the water brush again, and just bringing that color out until it decides to run out. And this one, it just extends just a tiny bit because I didn't put as much colored pencil down. I'm going to try the same thing with the watercolor brush to see what happens with that one. And with this, you have a little bit more of a hard line of the darker shade, but it does extend out and it stops sooner, kind of like what I was experiencing before. So I thought I would try watercoloring that first bird that I stamped and using the watercolor brush and with a more painterly look to it. So I started out by coloring on that yellow in the areas on the stamp where there was they have lines indicating where there would be shading. I decided to go with that because the best way to have awesome shading on your stamped images is to use the lines that the artist who drew the stamp gave you. So I'm taking the cues from that. I dried it and then brought in the light green that I used before. I'm using the exact same colors as I used on the first bird, but you'll be able to see the difference in how it was painted when I show you them side by side in a minute here. So I added the kind of limey green, and I didn't extend it out much. I wanted to keep it to those areas a little bit more. And I really like how it layered on top of that yellow color. And this yellow, I really wish for a basic set, I wish the yellow was a little bit more of a brighter yellow. This is almost like a pale buttery yellow. I wish it was slightly more of a yellow, if that makes sense. So after drawing the green painting, I brought in the pale blue or the lighter aqua blue, and I just added little tiny bits of blue to those areas because I really wanted to keep the center of the bird more pale, so it had more of a highlight. I wanted that contrast of color. So I'm adding a little bit of that blue, and as it goes on top of the green and the yellow, it doesn't really look so much blue anymore. It looks just like very transparent. It's layered over the top of that green. It just adds a little more intensity to the green. So then I brought in the dark blue, which I don't think I used on the original bird, but I felt like it needed that darker color just to get more of that contrast. So I colored on a little more of this dark blue and hardly any of it at all. I really only just wanted a little bit, but that color is quite concentrated, and so as I added water, it really started to move around. I liked the look of this more than any of the other attempts of coloring the birds. I really liked keeping the center area really light and then just the darker contrasted areas in a smaller amount. So I just dried that. And then I decided these birds, all of them look so sad. I can't figure out why they look so sad. And I thought, you know what? How would I use them on a card? Probably some sort of card saying that I was sorry I missed your birthday. So I decided to play with that idea, and I drew on some additional things onto this little bird stamp. So I thought it would be really funny if the bird was holding a balloon. And at first I thought I'll have the balloon up above his head, but I thought it'd be even more funny if the balloon was deflated and like laying on the ground like, he missed your birthday. He had a balloon and missed it. So I just thought it was funny. So I'm using this pen here. This is a Pilot pen that I found at jetpens.com. It's a waterproof pen. I was looking through all my markers and I couldn't find a marker that was completely waterproof. So I ended up using this pen. And I'll link it down in the supply section below so in case you're looking for a watercolor pen. It's great for addressing your envelopes, actually. I've used this for addressing cards before. So I just watercolored over the balloon and also the little party hat. And I'm making him look like he was ready for a party and just missed out. He missed the person's birthday. I just think it's so funny because he looks so concerned. And the deflated balloon just makes me giggle. So I colored a little bit of that purple, and then I also put a little bit of a shadow underneath the balloon just to make sure that it looked like it was next to the bird. So I took this alphabet set from Simon Says Stamp. I think it's the Simple Outline Alphabet, and I stamped the word sorry. And before I did that, I actually drew on a line with my T-square ruler to make sure that it would be on there completely straight. And then I stamped the letters in StazOn jet black ink. And then I took that same black pen and I wrote, "I missed your birthday," underneath the word sorry. And then I took the black colored watercolor pencil and added some color at the very bottom of the letters. And the way I discovered to get that fading was to kind of add water and then clean off my watercolor brush and then extend that color out. And that really gets that color fading more quickly than if you were to just color in the entire letter. Realized I forgot to add the string holding the party hat to his head, because otherwise how would it stay in place? So I added that string and put a little tied bow, and then I put a little bit of that black watercolor pencil right on the edge of that line and then watercolor that on so there was a little bit of shading under the string. To finish off the card, I actually trimmed down that watercolor piece to be 6 3/4 inches wide and 4 1/4 tall. So I'm putting it on a card that's slightly larger than that. I made the card be a finished size of 4 1/2 tall by 7 wide. So just put that on with some foam adhesive. And then that is my card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing kind of first impressions of these watercolor pencils from Prima. I think they're pretty great, good concentration of color, and they're fun for coloring images like this. So thank you so much for watching. I will catch you guys next time. Thanks again for watching today's video. On screen right now are 3 more card videos where I use some watercoloring techniques. So if you want to check those out, click on any of those images on screen right now. Like I said before, all of the supplies are listed down below in the video description. So if you'd like to see any of the supplies I used today, you can check out that list there. You can visit my blog at kwernerdesign.com. And thank you again for watching today's video. I will see you guys on Friday.